In a single breath, he loses his father, his home, and the last moments of innocence. Paul Atreides never asked for power, never sought prophecy, but the world pressed it into his hands. And behind every whisper of fate is a silence that feels like a trap. Stay with me, because by the end of this journey, we won't just see who Paul becomes, we'll see the cost of becoming, and the truth he was never meant to understand. Paul is born into 3 legacies, each one loud, heavy, and unforgiving.
The blood of a duke, the force of a religion, and the genetic experiment of a secretive sisterhood!
His path isn't walked, it's pulled by duty, by design, by dreams. Duke Leto raises him with honor, but honor becomes a weight. A great man doesn't seek to lead, he's called to it. But what if that calling feels like a noose? Jessica gives him more than a mother's love. She gives him training, control, fear. She was meant to bear a daughter, a pawn in a centuries-long game. She chose Paul instead, and now she fears what she created. A son carved out of hope, love, and prophecy. To the Bene Gesserit, Paul is a variable in a breeding program. To the Atreides, he's the future of a house standing on the edge of war. And to himself, he's a stranger in a role he didn't audition for. Alan Watts said, "Trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth." Paul is biting, hard, on duty, on expectation, on fate. He bleeds not from wounds, but from the pressure to become more than a boy. Before he can become anything great, he must break free from everything fake. Paul dreams, not in fragments, but in loops. He sees war, sand, a knife held in a girl's hand. He sees himself dying or becoming something inhuman. Every dream feels like a riddle sharpened into fear. His visions don't reassure, they haunt. He isn't shown a destiny, he's shown a warning. He sees a jihad fought in his name, entire worlds burning, people chanting his name like a god before dying for it. This isn't prophecy. It's existential horror masquerading as destiny. Paul doesn't know if he's the savior or the weapon. He confesses. What if I'm not the future of House Atreides? You are. Not like you think I am. In those words, we hear dread, not arrogance. This is not the power fantasy of chosen ones. This is the terror of becoming someone you never chose to be. Dune takes a sharp turn here. It's not about spaceships or spice. It's about what happens when the future arrives, and it demands your soul. Duke Leto isn't naive. He's hopeful. He accepts Arrakis not as conquest, but as an opportunity to build peace, to create trust, to reshape the future. He treats the Fremen not as obstacles, but as equals. And in doing so, he signs his death sentence, because power doesn't tolerate virtue. Baron Harkonnen doesn't fight fair. He fights with rot, with betrayal, with brutality wrapped in strategy. Leto dies in silence, gassed, powerless, heartbroken. He doesn't leave with glory. He leaves with a failed dream. Nietzsche wrote, "He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster." Leto never became one. He remained human. And in a universe ruled by politics, prophecy, and profit, humanity is a fatal flaw. His death is not just the fall of a man. It's the death of a kind of leadership. The kind that tries to heal, not dominate. Leto dies, and with him, the dream of peace fades into desert winds. Duncan isn't just a fighter, he's family. To Paul, he's not a mentor, he's a mirror, someone who sees the boy, not the prophecy. Duncan never needed Paul to be anything more than human, and that's why he protects him until the last breath. His sacrifice isn't grand, it's intimate. No music swells, no crowd watches, just Duncan and a door. He fights for time, not triumph. He buys seconds with his life. Frankel said, "What is to give light must endure burning." Duncan burns brightly, not to be remembered, but to ensure Paul survives long enough to choose his path. There's no reward, no monument, no glory, only stillness and sacrifice. In Dune, loyalty is silent, and love is not declared, it is acted. Duncan dies not for a hero, but for a friend, and for that, he becomes one of the quiet immortals. Jessica was trained to obey. She was sculpted by the Bene Gesserit to birth power, not love. But she chose love, and that changed everything. She gave Leto a son. She gave Paul a future the sisterhood never planned for. And now she walks beside that future, unable to stop it. Jessica is both guide and ghost. She holds Paul's hand as he slips further from her reach. She sees the cost of her choice. The boy she loves is becoming a symbol, and symbols are not people. They are tools. The sand doesn't mourn, but Jessica does. Her silence is full of grief. Her strength is laced with regret. To be a mother is to love someone you cannot save. And Jessica realizes, perhaps too late, that when you break the pattern, you don't always fix it. You just trade one fate for another. The desert is not empty, it is sacred. It's where lies evaporate, where legacies are stripped down to instinct. Here, Paul isn't royal, he isn't chosen. He's just a boy learning how to breathe without safety. The Fremen don't follow, they watch, they wait. In Arrakis, belief is never inherited, it's earned. Through water, through blood, through silence. The desert demands more than strength. It demands surrender. Paul must give up his name, his past, his identity. Not to forget who he was, but to become who he must be. Every grain of sand is a question, every step is a test. What are you willing to let die, to let something greater live? The duel with Jameis is not a battle, it's a rite. Paul has trained for war, but he's never had to end a life. Now he must. This isn't victory, it's transformation. He doesn't kill Jameis for revenge. He kills because the moment demands it, because becoming requires sacrifice, even of the self. He who can destroy a thing controls a thing. And Paul destroys not to win, but to enter, to pass through a doorway made of blood. Dune ends not in triumph, it ends in wait. Paul isn't celebrating, he's calculating. He's no longer dreaming, he's walking the nightmare. In his mother's eyes, we see fear. In Chani's whisper, we hear fate. And in Paul's silence, we understand. He's not the answer. He's the warning. Dune is not a war story. It's not even about power. It's about identity, torn apart and rebuilt by belief, pressure, and pain. It asks, what does it mean to be yourself in a world that decided who you are before you were born? It shows us that love can uplift and manipulate. that faith can inspire and imprison, that legacy can guide or erase. And sometimes the most terrifying future is the one where you get exactly what others hoped for. Because destiny isn't always a gift. Sometimes it's a prison with golden walls. If cinema helps you confront questions you can't ask out loud, you're already one of us. Subscribe to CineWithin, where we explore the truth hiding behind every frame.